یعنی ما علمای اسلام که ما در او حال خود در جمله علما نزنم، اما ما شخصا برای شما میگم و برای خود آقای دونالد ترامپ هم میگم، آقای دونالد ترامپ، ما شفیع عیار یک عالم اسلام یعنی ما علمای اسلام که ما در او حال خود در جمله علما نزنم، اما ما شخصا برای شما میگم و برای خود آقای دونالد ترامپ هم میگم، آقای دونالد ترامپ، ما شفیع عیار یک عالم اسلام یعنی ما علمای اسلام که ما در او حال خود در جمله علما نزنم. آقای دونالد ترامپ برای دفعه اول یک گپ میزنه که احتمال داره به نفع ما مسلمان ها باشه. ما فکر میکنیم که نه، برای ما برای ما نیست.
I have to worry about Donald Trump creating a climate of fear that impacts our day-to-day lives. Yesterday I got an email from John Mueller. He's a political scientist at Ohio State University. He's written a book titled Overblown. He reminded me that the risk of you being victim of a terror strike in this country is 1 in 4 million on an annual basis. I think we do need some perspective from time to time.
آقای دونالد ترامپ برای دفعه اول یک گپ میزنه که احتمال داره به نفع ما مسلمان ها باشه. ما فکر میکنیم که نه، برای ما نیست.
Terror in a global perspective. I mean, we see the United States right now reeling from its own tragedy, the attack in San Bernardino. You wrote recently this week in the Washington Post discussing some of the anti-Muslim rhetoric that we've seen recently. I want to read part of that. The reality is that Muslims are today the most despised minority in America. Their faith is constantly criticized and they face insults, discrimination, and a dramatic rise in acts of violence against them. You go on to write, and the leading Republican candidate has flirted with the idea of registering Muslims, a form of collective punishment that has not been seen since the internment of Japanese Americans in the 1940s. This is the first time that I can recall watching politicians pander to mobs and then congratulate themselves for their political courage. My question to you, Fareed, do you think that voters will ultimately punish politicians that say these things or reward them?
I hope they would punish them, but I fear they will reward them. Look, throughout history and times of crisis, in times when the order is unsettled, fear is a very powerful emotion, and demagogues know that. Demagogues know that if you prey on people's fears, it's much easier to get a rise out of them. It's much easier to get them to vote from their gut, from the uncomfortable, uneasy feeling that people have. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of American politicians are right now doing.
Finally, mass shootings. We've seen yet another in this country, an occurrence that is far, far too frequent. You've written about this. I spent part of the past week in San Bernardino, California, and you compared it to the U.S. reaction when we know something is terrorism. When we label something terrorism, we will not spare any cost. Billions upon billions of dollars, lives lost, wars fought. When it comes to mass shootings in this country, you argue you see a lot of hand-wringing, political bickering. Ultimately, what?
Well, if you look at the statistics I point to, since 9/11, the number of people who've been killed, Americans who've been killed in acts that could be described as international terrorism, I think it was about 50. Let's say it's gone up to about 75 now. This is in all the years since 9/11. In that much time, 150,000 Americans have been killed by guns, in gun homicides, and a much larger number in gun suicides. And we do nothing. If anything, gun laws have become easier. It has become easier to access guns. President Obama pointed out something that even I was struck by. He pointed out that there are terrorists or potential terrorists who are on no-fly lists. Those same people can go into any gun store in America and buy whatever guns, whatever semi-automatic weapons they want, and the government can't do anything about it. So there's some kind of weird mismatch here where when we think it's some threatening other, particularly if it's an other who looks, feels, sounds different, we're willing to do all kinds of things. We'll invade two countries, spend hundreds of billions of dollars, deprive ourselves of our own liberties with things like the Patriot Act. But we won't ask for gun registration, we won't ask for background checks, we won't ask for simple common sense stuff. And if there's some sense in which, I don't know, sometimes I think we've just gotten used to this, where we think it's like traffic accidents, but it isn't. There are very simple, sensible procedures we can take. And look, we have so much evidence from around the world that this stuff works. Australia used to have mass shootings. They put in place gun laws. They have not had a single mass shooting since then.
What did you think when you read the BBC headline, "Just Another Day in America"?
Sad but true. We now are at a point where, as you know, we have had more mass shootings than there are days in this year. And again, as I point out, that doesn't count the number of suicides. We have this extraordinary number of suicides. Now, look, people try to kill themselves all over the world. We succeed because, again, we have this easy availability of guns.
Fareed Zakaria, thank you.